When I'm hungry and I see a picture of a big juicy hamburger, I think to myself, that is going in my belly. But in the time it takes for me to grab my keys, put on my shoes, and jump in my car, I suddenly reflect on all the studies I've read that tells me that eating red meat increases your chances of heart disease and high cholesterol. Kind of kills the mood. But the thing we're going to talk about today is that just because two things occur in relation to each other, it doesn't necessarily mean that they cause each other. Oh, I can't be mad at you. In my previous video, we talked about how psychologists use certain methods to describe behavior. In doing so, they might find certain traits that occur together or relate to one another. Like people at the mall that are waiting in line to get their froyo on, they also might be browsing their phone at the same time. In cases like this, we say that two behaviors correlate. Now, a correlation is a measure of the extent to which two factors vary together, and of how well either factor predicts the other. The two behaviors here are waiting and browsing your phone. So if you were to put someone in a line to wait for that delicious frozen yogurt, then they're more likely to pull out their phone and start browsing the internet because they have time to waste. Now, in order to measure the interaction between these two behaviors, we use a statistical measure called the correlation coefficient. And this ranges from -1 to +1. Waiting in line and using your phone is an example of a positive correlation. And this indicates a direct relationship, meaning that both these things increase at the same time. The more you're spending time in line, the more likely you're going to pull out your phone. A positive correlation falls between 0 and +1 on the correlation coefficient, with 0 meaning that there is no relationship between the two things, and +1 meaning that as one behavior goes up, the other goes up at the same rate. Now, a positive correlation doesn't only mean that two things increase at the same time, it can also mean that two things decrease at the same time. Let me give you an example. As temperatures drop outside, people tend to move around less in order to conserve energy. Now, both temperature and movement are decreasing together. The important thing to remember here is that things can still decrease and be called a positive correlation because they're decreasing in relation to one another, or at the same time. Now, there is another correlation called a negative correlation, and this indicates an inverse relationship, meaning that as one thing increases, the other thing decreases. Now, this falls on the correlation coefficient between -1 and 0, with 0 again meaning no relationship, and -1 meaning that one set of scores goes down precisely as the other goes up. Now, this is kind of like people on opposite sides of a teeter-totter. With one person being on the low end, the other person would be on the high end. Let's go back to our previous example and say that it's still freezing outside. See, as the temperature drops, you're more likely to turn the heat up. In a similar fashion, if it's boiling outside, you're more likely to turn the heat down. See, as one thing goes up, the other thing goes down. So what correlations do is they help us predict things. If I eat a lot of hamburgers, then it could increase my cholesterol, and that's a prediction. Now, the thing that stumps a lot of people is they believe that association proves causation. If I keep eating hamburgers, I will get high cholesterol. But no matter how strong the relationship is, association does not prove causation. See, causation is the idea that A causes B, or if A occurs, then B will occur. It could be that eating lots of hamburgers will increase an individual's cholesterol. Or it could be that an individual who has high cholesterol already eats lots of hamburgers. See how the two are flipped? Or there could be a third factor that contributes to both A and B. Let's say the individual has a stressful job, and it leads to both their high cholesterol and increased appetite for burgers. So as option 2 and 3 show, we get the same positive correlation between cholesterol and burgers, even when they're switched around and another factor is introduced. Now, the really important thing to remember here is that association does not prove causation. A correlation may indicate the possibility of a cause and effect relationship, but that's all it can do. If you understand this principle, you will be a lot wiser when you hear the news of scientific studies. In this video, we talked about correlations and how they help us predict the relationship between factors. We talked about the statistical measure of the correlation coefficient and how it ranges from -1 to +1. We discussed the positive correlation, which indicates a direct relationship, meaning that either two things increase together or they decrease together. We also talked about a negative correlation, which indicates an inverse relationship, meaning that as one thing increases, another thing decreases. And finally, we said that no matter how strong a correlational relationship is, it does not prove causation. Thank you for watching my video on correlations. If you like this, be sure to check out some of my other videos on my Psychology 101 segment. And keep a lookout for future videos coming out soon.